Welcome back to The Conscious Conscience, and thanks for tuning in. Today we're diving right into World War II, a reflection of shadows of the past and modern times, Part 2. However, we want to add a listener discretion to our remaining episodes in this series, containing discussions of historical and present-day atrocities, including genocide, systemic oppression, and acts of political violence. Some content may be distressing, particularly for those affected by these topics. Our goal is to inform, not to sensationalize, to confront the past and present with honesty and clarity. We encourage listeners to engage with care, take breaks if needed, and seek support if these topics become overwhelming. History is difficult, but ignoring it is far from dangerous. Thank you for listening. Germany, 1929, a country struggling to find its footing in the aftermath of World War I. The scars of defeat ran deep: economic devastation, political instability, and people desperate for hope. This was the soil in which Adolf Hitler planted his vision. The world was in crisis. The American stock market crash of 1929 sent shockwaves across Europe and Germany. Already fragile under the weight of war, was crushed. Banks failed, businesses closed, and hunger crept into homes like a slow-moving plague. By 1932, 6 million Germans were unemployed. Some would say, yesterday I had a job. Today I stand in line for a bowl of soup, hoping there's enough left when I reach the front. For the working class, hope was vanishing. The Weimar Republic, Germany's young democracy, struggled to contain the crisis. In the Reichstag, politicians bickered while people starved. With each passing day, democracy looked less like a solution and more like an obstacle. In the midst of this suffering, a man who once seemed insignificant began to command attention. Adolf Hitler, a veteran of the Great War, had spent years preaching a doctrine of nationalism, vengeance, and purity. Through fiery speeches and propaganda, he told the German people that their suffering had a cause, and more importantly, a cure. He rallied against the Treaty of Versailles, calling it a betrayal that had crippled Germany, and blamed communist, Jewish people, and political opponents for the nation's decline. Through staged rallies, striking imagery, and carefully crafted slogans, he painted himself as the only leader capable of restoring Germany's former glory. His rhetoric transformed resentment into action, turning economic despair into a rallying cry for a radical new order. He promised that Germany would be great again, that the weak politicians in Berlin had failed them, that the Jews and the Marxists were the ones who brought Germany to its knees. At first, Hitler and his Nazi party were dismissed as radicals. But desperation breeds dangerous choices. The Nazis offered simple answers to complex problems: and millions were willing to listen. By 1932, Hitler's message was no longer fringe. The Nazi Party won 37% of the vote in the national elections, making them the largest party in the Reichstag. Germany was shifting. The old powers, desperate to control Hitler, believed they could use him. They were wrong. On January 30th, 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany. It was a decision that would change history forever. Less than a month later, on February 27, 1933, the Reichstag, Germany's parliament building, was engulfed in flames. Hitler and his followers pointed to a scapegoat, the communists. The radio said they tried to overthrow the government. Your neighbor didn't believe it. But who could argue with the Führer? The Reichstag fire gave Hitler the excuse he needed. Within days, civil liberties were stripped away. Free speech, gone. Political opposition, outlawed. The Nazis unleashed a wave of terror, arresting communists, socialists, and anyone who stood in their way.
Selber machen. Macht das doch. Jungs, mal Aufnahme.
On June 30th, 1934, they entered the Night of the Long Knives. Hitler's rise wasn't just about eliminating his external enemies. It was about solidifying total control. Over the course of one bloody night, he ordered the execution of his own political allies, including Ernst Röhm, the leader of the SA, the Nazis' own paramilitary wing. Those who had helped him rise now lay dead, ensuring there were no rivals left to challenge his rule. By 1935, the transformation was complete. The Nazi Party had seized control of the press, the courts, the schools, and the churches. Propaganda flooded every aspect of daily life, portraying Hitler as Germany's savior and reinforcing the belief that loyalty to the regime was both a duty and a necessity. Those who resisted quietly vanished. In classrooms across the country, education became indoctrination. Children were taught the supposed superiority of the Aryan race and warned to remain ever vigilant against those who sought to weaken Germany from within. The lessons fostered division, deepening the rift between communities and shaping an entire generation in the regime's image. Dissent was no longer just discouraged, it was dangerous. Neighbors reported on one another, driven by fear, loyalty, or ambition. A careless word, even in private, could lead to imprisonment, or worse. And so many Germans, even those who felt uneasy, chose silence over resistance. The first to suffer were political enemies. Then came the so-called undesirables, the disabled, the Roma, homosexuals, and Jews. The concentration camps first built in 1933 to house political prisoners expanded. What began as persecution would soon become extermination. By 1939, Hitler had turned Germany into a war machine, leading the world into its deadliest conflict. But before the invasions, before the camps, before the millions of lost lives, there were choices. Choices made by politicians, by military leaders, by ordinary people. Some resisted, many did absolutely nothing, and history remembers both. As we reflect on this history, we must ask ourselves, when ideologies of division, scapegoating, and authoritarianism emerge in our own time, will we recognize them? More importantly, will we act before it's too late? In our next episode, we'll explore the full scale of devastation that followed Hitler's rise. The Holocaust, World War II, and the lasting scars of these events on our world today. Until then, stay vigilant, stay informed, and remember, history does not repeat itself, but it often rhymes.